Goodtime Charlie is known around the world as the godfather of single-needle black and gray tattoos. Never one to take no for an answer, Charlie persevered and was finally given a shot by Jimbo Leporte. He was told to audition with Zeke Owen to test his tattoo skills. After passing that test, Jimbo gave him a chance to work at his first tattoo shop, West Coast Tattoo, alongside Tennessee Dave, where he honed his craft and picked up tips and tricks from artists around him. The Pike is where he was given the nickname Goodtime Charlie. Years later, Charlie would open up a shop in East LA, where there had been no tattoo shops since World War II. East LA is where Charlie and Jack Rudy would take prison-style tattoos, perfect them, and bring them to the mainstream. Charlie and Jack became the godfathers of single-needle black and gray work that is now known worldwide. Join us as we sit down with this legend and talk about his beginnings, his years in tattooing, and the Tattoo Heritage Project, which he holds near and dear to his heart. "15, I heard you started tattooing?
Yeah.
And doing the hand poke?
Yeah. 1955.
You were growing up in Kansas.
Yeah.
Did you see a lot of tattooed people?
No, it was only just hand poke stuff. That was, all the neighborhood kids and gangs. And that was basically all you ever really saw. You never saw anybody with a lot of professional tattoos at all. You were lucky if you saw. It was kind of a conservative area, pretty much, Wichita. And so there wasn't very many people sporting professional tattoos at all.
Right. I know during that time frame, the Midwest.
Yeah.
But if you're on the East Coast, West Coast, a different story. You probably would have been more apt to see professional. I know you went into the Navy, so you already knew how to hand poke.
Yeah.
And you were doing stuff, out of your car and.
Yeah.
While you were in the Navy, were you were tattooing?
I tattooed 13 tattoos on one guy in basic training behind the lockers on Sunday, and I tattooed a lot of guys in there. But I put 13 tattoos on one man.
Nice.
While I was in basic training.
Right. So, at what point you wound up going to the Navy, and then when you got out of the Navy, you were on the West Coast?
Yeah, I was only in there 8 months. They got rid of me real quick.
What'd you do?
Well, I didn't do anything. That was the problem. I wouldn't cooperate with them because I told them, you guys lied to me. He told me I was going to learn a trade in here. And I qualified for lithography school. And they told me, well, you gotta wait a year to get in that school. So they wanted me to do mess cooking and all that and all these other things. I said, I don't want to be a cook. And they said, you have to do general duty for a year, which involved mess cooking for 3 months, lawn maintenance for 3 months. I said, I don't want to be a gardener. And then they said, and you got to get, or housekeeping for 3 months. I don't want to be a maid. And then the other one was machine shop. You had to sweep up all the, the burrs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to be a machinist. I qualified for lithography. and I said, so I'm not going to play ball with you guys because you lied to me.
Right.
And so I just went AWOL, and of course I stayed more than 30 days, so they got me, for desertion. And so I went to jail, and they took my stripe away and all my money. But I just fought them to the end. I said, they just took me right back to mess cooking when they let me out of jail after 6 weeks. But when I faced my court-martial, I told the old man that was in charge, I don't know what he was, admiral or something, but he said, son, do you realize you signed a contract with Uncle Sam for 4 years? I said, yes, sir. He said, you're going to fulfill that contract, aren't you? And I said, no, sir. And he said, you can end up in a federal penitentiary with an attitude like that. And I said, I can do 8 years in a federal pen rather than 4 years with liars.
Wow.
And so anyway, they sent me to the psych ward and talked to the doctor, and he said, well, we can't, you're no good to the Navy with your attitude, and so how would you like to be a civilian again? And I said, well, I guess I'd like that. And he
Nice.
said, well, that's what you're going to be because you're no good to us. Because they would take me to work and they put me right back on mess cooking. They said, that's what you're going to do. I said, no, I'm not. And I just walked right out the back, fired up a cigarette, and they beat me up 2 or 3 mornings, the shore patrol, and took me to work, but I'd always defy them and just walk right out the back door.
Nice.
And so the last time that happened, he said, you better go across there and talk to the doctor over there. We're having real problems with you. I said, well, you're going to have problems because you guys are the problem.
Right.
And so anyway, they got rid of me, and I was real happy about that. But I did a few tattoos in there, and I actually got my first professional tattoo by Tahiti Felix at Masters Tattoo on the first Liberty that we had while I was in basic.
Okay.
So I did get a tattoo in there, my first professional tattoo. And then after I got out, I immediately, when they kicked me out, I just immediately went to Painless Nell, and she outlined one, and then her peg leg cousin or sister that she called Joe filled it in at the next chair. You just moved over.
So let me ask you something. How many times have you seen that? Like it's almost like a production line.
Yeah.
Because the only person now that I've heard your story, the only other person or people that I've ever heard do that were Sailor Eddie and Esther.
Yeah.
Sailor Eddie would do all the outline, and then Esther would do all the coloring. And that blew my mind because modern day,
Yeah.
I've never seen that done.
Well, I've even mentioned that to a few people. I says, that's really not a bad idea because it's not any one particular person's work.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a combination, but what's wrong with that? You got a piece of both of them, you know?
Right. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
Now, Eddie said that it was more about efficiency and the fact that Esther didn't like to do black. She liked to do all the color. And I thought, well, it worked. I mean, they were cranking them out back then.
Yeah.
When you got out of the Navy, though, you like I said, you ended up in the West Coast? Or did you go back to Kansas?
Well, I stayed, I hung around San Diego for a few days, but my folks had moved to L.A. while I was in the Navy to Maywood. And so I went up north to visit them, and when I got off the bus in Long Beach,
Okay.
to begin with, that's where I took my ticket to. I was at the Pike, right there at the Pike. And so, man, that was a new world for me.
Yeah.
And so right away, I was exposed to all these guys. And I guess I got a tattoo from Bert Grimm, this Indian girl right there.
Okay.
And so then I ended up with going back to Kansas because I couldn't quite figure out. I didn't like the professional. What do I call it?
Like attitude? Or...
Well, yeah, the way they operated, they were so carny about everything. I thought even Bert Grimm and all and like Owen Jensen. I had him tattoo me, but I said, Owen, you look straight at me and put a crooked star on me, and I did all those 7 in the mirror, and they're straight. And he says, what do you want for $5? So that was the attitude.
Okay.
And, and I even watched little Franny make a cross-eyed virgin on a guy's back and giggle about it. And I thought, well, this is not, I wanted to put whatever they wanted. I didn't want to just do a get-over job. I wanted to give people what they wanted. And when I heard them say all the time, well, you can't have it if it's not on the wall, I thought, what are we talking about, man? You should have anything you want. I would think.
So we're going to get into that in a little bit where I've heard you saying a lot about you should get the haircut you want because I want to get into that at the end where we talk about current state.
Another thing was that they were just so flippant about it. It was like, give them a lick and a promise and send them on their way.
Right.
You know, it's like, what did they know about tattoos? They don't know how they're supposed to look anyway. You know, and so they'd eliminate half of the color or just shade out a little bit. And so it was always a get over job to me. Everybody was trying to get over on somebody, and I thought, man, I'm not trying to get over on anybody. I'm just trying to, you know, give them the tattoo they want.
Right.
And one that I would be satisfied with. So that to me is what it's all about with tattoos. Is it's got to satisfy your soul. And so when they ask you for something, they're looking for satisfaction.
Right.
Not a guy that's trying to figure out how to get over on them.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was it was a big turnoff to me about professional tattooing, and I thought, none of these guys draw. What the hell's wrong with them? They're putting pictures on people, and they're just tracers. They're not creators. I don't understand that.
Did you draw a lot as a kid?
Oh yeah. I just drew everything directly. I didn't even know. I never even heard of stencils. I didn't even know anything about any kind of a stencil, whether it was paper or acetate or anything.
Right.
So I just drew out of my mind, and my headliner was full of things that I had drawn on there with a ballpoint pen. It was all felt,
right.
You know. And so they would get in there and say, I like that kind of a cross, and I like that kind of a banner, you know.
Right,
and
right.
So I would just draw right on them.
So you were basically just traveling around in your car at that point and tattooing whoever,
well,
you know?
Locally, that I tattooed every gang in town because I was the tattoo man, and I was respected by all of them and accepted by all of them, even though I was a part of the Golden Hawks group, you know.
Yeah.
But all of them accepted me. But the biggest gang in town was Los Reyes, Mexican gang in the North End, and their symbol was a crown, and so I did a lot of all the different identifications from these different gangs too.
And then at that point, so tell me how you went from that to into the professional, let's call it professional.
Okay.
I know that there's like the story with Zeke Owen. But how did you get introduced to Zeke and that? How did that happen?
Well, I just, when I went to, I got real disgusted. I told her, I said, I'm not coming home till I got some answers. Because I'd been tattooing around the LA area there, just still by hand, because I didn't like professional tattooing. And so I'd been doing that for years. And I finally just told her, I said, this is just bullshit. These guys won't give me even all these guys, Lou Lewis and all these guys I got tattooed by. They were very cold-shouldered about everything, tight-lipped, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And Bob Heyman, the only thing I got out of him was, he says, all I'm going to tell you is I work in Hawaii 6 months and Long Beach 6 months. That's all the information you're getting out of me. Because I would always ask them, you know, so is this a full-time gig for you, or is it part-time, a hobby, weekend, what is, you know, who wants to know? And I says, well, I'm asking. And they go, well, who are you? You know? And so nobody would tell me anything. And so I got real disgusted and told her, I said, I'm going to get answers. And so I went to the Pike, and I walked in West Coast with Jimbo Leporte and Captain Jim Owen. So when I walked in there, Mike Crow, you may not know who he was, but he was a hippie kind of a guy that was a friend of Jimbo's. And he was a charcoal artist, and he really was a good artist, but he did caricatures like sidewalk artists, you know, in San Francisco or something. So he really could draw, and he was a good artist, but he was a hardcore alcoholic. He would start the shift with a fifth of tequila, and at the end of it, it was all gone.
Wow.
But that guy could tattoo drunk regardless. And so Anyway, he wouldn't give me anything either. And I said, well, I'm just sick of this. Nobody's going to tell me nothing. And boy, Jimbo came busting through the curtains. So you know how to tattoo, huh? And I said, yeah. I said, but nobody's going to help me figure out this professional angle. And he says, well, why don't you take some skin down to 5th and Main and show us what you got Tuesday or 5 o'clock or something. So I asked one of my neighbors there who had tattooed before and his brother several times, I guess. I've tattooed Tony. And so I said, well, why don't you go downtown with me? They want to see what I got. And he said, okay. So we walked in, and Zeke was the only guy in the shop at 5th and Main. When I walked in, he said, you must be Charlie. And I go, yeah. And he said, well, they said you were coming. So he said, hey, man, here's the setup. I'm going to go get some coffee and a burger, and I'll be back.
And you know what? I've heard you tell that story, and it blows my mind that it was Zeke Owens to begin with, and then that they did that to you.
So when he disappeared, he just walked away from everything and said, there you go. And I said, so what do you want? To Tony, and he says, I don't know, how about some mushrooms on my leg? And I said, okay. So I drew some on there and tattooed them, and I'm almost positive, I can't say, but thinking back, I think I even put hongos sagrados under it, sacred mushroom. And I said, so, do you want any of this color? And he says, I don't know, what do you think? And I said, well, I don't care. I don't like it, but...
You're the one that's got to wear it.
Yeah, and he said, okay, let's do it. So I did that, cleaned him up, and he walked in right when I finished cleaning him up, and he looked at that leg, and he said, guy's been tattooing 10 years, don't tattoo like that. And
let me ask you something, though. So your whole career up to that point, you were using hand poke.
Yeah.
What was it like having that machine in your hand the first time?
Well, it just seemed like it was just easy as pie. I mean, I don't know. I had a machine I didn't like, and so I quit using it, before and at home. When he says that, he says, and I've never let anybody tattoo with my machines before. He said, I knew you had it when you walked through the door. He told me those words. He said, I knew you had it when you walked through the door. And I said, wow. And he says, so if I can, I said, so if I can ever do anything for you, let me know. And he said, from what they tell me, you've said that you're going to open a tattoo shop in East LA when you figure out these machines. And I said, yeah. Right away, I just announced that. And he said, obviously, I hear you're a self-taught guy, and nobody can say you can't tattoo, but he says, I would encourage you to work with other people for at least 2 years that have been in the business a while, and you'll pick up little tips, maybe about applying them that they know, and that's the way it went. I said, well, okay, I'll do that. So that's why they kept me there at Skid Row for a couple months.
And that was, you were working with Tennessee Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, Dave, he opened up in Santa Ana eventually.
Spellman?
Huh?
Spellman?
Well, anyway, I worked with a bunch of those guys there, and while I was there, I thought, this is just, we're in Skid Row, and so how many 18-year-old girls that want a hard on their hiney are going to come down here at midnight to Skid Row and get a tattoo? It didn't make any sense to me. And so I didn't figure that was I didn't want to stay there. Anyway, they sent me transferred me to Long Beach, to the West Coast there. And right away, I told those guys too, I'm going to open in East LA.
Right.
And when I figured this out.
You basically started East LA again, right? Obviously, there was a big gap. And then also in Kansas, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
pioneered that whole area.
So, everybody always thinks of you as the pioneer of the black and gray.
Yeah. And that, wow,
there's also that's huge, obviously, but it's also shine the light on the fact that you were the guy that brought it back to East LA, and you were the guy that brought it back to Kansas. That's amazing to me.
Yeah. there wasn't anybody tattooing in East L.A. They told me, nobody's tattooed there since World War II. Why do you want to go over there?
Right.
They said there's no money there. And I said, are you kidding? They got guns, they got drugs. They look at their paint jobs on their card. It's their priorities, that's all. And then they says, well, it's too dangerous over there. It's all gangs. And I go, I was part of a gang, man. I said, so, I was a small-time hood, I guess you'd say, in my day. And that life is not new to me. And because I knew cop shooters and all these kind of guys, So that to me wasn't
big deal.
It's scary. And so, and I speak more Spanish than a lot of Chicanos even do. And so, in fact, this guy, Gabriel Garcia, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a SoCal tall white beam. Boy, he's a good guy though, very, very quiet. But he posted sometime recently, this guy, Goodtime Charlie, he's the real deal. I've heard his story many times, 5 or 6 times now. And he says he's an honorary Chicano, gangster, criminal, and God's main man in tattooing.
Nice.
And so that didn't frighten me at all.
Yeah,
going to East LA.
And I mean, obviously that turned out to be an amazing thing. I saw a picture of a chopper. Did you ride a lot?
I did buy a trike from Lady Blue, who was working for me in East LA. And I was walking past her one time, going to the back room, and I heard her say, I'd sell it to you for $1,500 to her customer. And I said, what are you selling for $1,500? And she said, my trike. And I said, wow, I thought you gave the Angels $4,500 to buy all the parts. And she said, well, I did, but I need the money. And I said, well, I'll give you $1,500 for it, and I don't even want one. And so I bought it, but me and her hardly ever used it. We hardly ever rode it. In fact, once a year or so, I'd take it out of the garage just to exercise it.
Right.
And drive it to the beach and back. But I didn't like it because everywhere you stop, people would mob you and want to ask you questions. I didn't like all that attention, so I never hardly rode it at all. And I took it to Kansas and sold it back there, though.
Okay. I was just curious because I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask you that.
Yeah, well, it was Lady Blues that I bought from her, and she told me I went to the valley out here to Glendale, or Burbank, I think it was, to pick it up from Blue, and so she was following me back. I said, boy, this thing's squirrely. I said, I'm going to take the main roads back home. If I get on the freeway, I don't know what to do with it. It just stand up immediately if you goosed it,
Nice.
So she follows me all the way back home, and she tells me we enter Whittier Boulevard right at the west end by the cemetery down there. We enter it right there, and as we're going down there, it's 5 o'clock, and all the big businesses are getting out of work. And she told me, you're not going anywhere very much by yourself on that. All those girls that came out of those buildings were all pointing and laughing and
yeah, well, goes with the territory of having a motorcycle.
But I would even pull up to a stop sign sometime, and middle-aged babes would pull up next to me in a Mercedes or something and roll her window down. Bet you have some fun on that, baby. And I said, well, I guess I would if I ever rode it. And they just look at me kind of funny,
Did you choose Whittier Boulevard because of the cruising and the main thoroughfare over the other streets?
Yeah, because I lived right off Whittier Boulevard. And for 1 year, every Sunday we would drive back and forth and look for a spot. When I saw it, I knew that was the point. Halfway between Atlantic and Garfield.
Yeah, so you had that just insight back then.
Yeah.
So when you got that shop going and obviously it took off, did you expect it to turn into what it did?
I just knew it was going to work. That's all. I didn't know how big it was going to get, but I just knew I was going to serve that community and give them what they wanted, and because I knew the kind of stuff they liked.
Right.
And because where I grew up, it was half brown and half white anyway. All in the clique I ran in, I was kind of Mexican oriented, I guess you'd say, even then as a kid, you know.
I've always heard you talk about how you just didn't really like color.
And I still don't. And when people would ask me quite often, when I would say, are we doing this in color or black? And they'd say, well, how would you do it? And I say, just black. And they'd say, why? And I said, number one, it's going to be cheaper. Number two, it's going to heal faster. And number three, it's going to last longer. And so there's 3 good reasons to get it in black. And I knew that was the way East LA liked them anyway.
Right. So you're giving what the people want.
Exactly. All we did was just satisfy the soul of that community, you know, and that's as simple as that. In my opinion.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, and that's going to bring me right up to the get the haircut that you want thing.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think I don't want to say you're the first one to do that as well. I mean, we might as well add that to the board and chalk that up for another one for you. But think about that. You know, prior to that, if it ain't on the wall, you ain't getting it.
Yeah.
And you changed that. Now all of a sudden, we're getting some of the newer tattoo artists that are like, oh, I'm not doing that. That's not my thing. That mentality just completely came right back around in a different way.
Right.
But here we are again. We're back to no. I do this. I don't do American traditional or whatever.
Yeah, there's all specialists. They you know, like I used to we would in Modesto even we would just laugh at people when they come in and say, "Who's the lettering guy?" And we would just look at them like, "What are you talking about?" And they go, "Well, we went to a shop, you know, and they said the lettering guy ain't in today." And I said, "Well, you can't even work here if you can't do lettering." And then it was always the same thing. Who does portraits in here? Or who's a traditional guy? I never understood that mentality anyway.
Right.
That you're just a one pony trick, you know?
Yeah, it basically cuts your clientele in half.
Oh, it does. You eliminate so many people when you start telling them, oh, I'm just a black and gray guy. Well, you can't be afraid to put color in them or refuse to put color in them if that's what they want. There's givers and takers, and so whatever they're going to take, we're going to give.
Right.
I think. And even though I have a few colored tattoos, and they would always say, well, you have some color. And I go, yeah, but I regret ever getting any of it because you think it makes the tattoo better. I said, tattoos don't do a damn thing for a tattoo to make it better. It doesn't. It's just a different animal.
You set out to be a tattoo artist, a tattooer, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
To have a family and pay your bills, and you didn't set out to be a rock star and all this other shit, right?
Right, I just wanted to take care of her and my kids.
Exactly. So what was it like for you when you walked into that convention in, 76?
77, because I refused to go to the first one in 76 in Houston. And Jack says, we're not going to the first tattoo convention ever? And I said, I've worked with tattooers who wouldn't walk across the street to talk to another tattooer. And he goes, well, I guess we're not going.
Right.
And so we didn't go. I said, just because they put on tattoos, what does that mean? I know a bunch of those scallywags, and I don't identify with them, you know?
Yeah, but so I guess where I'm going with that is you guys walk in there, and it's well documented that you were turning heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your, when you walked in there, were you expecting that? Or was that just like, you know what, hey, I'm here?
Well, Jack and Poco, one of our customers, they both talked me into going up there to Reno. And they said, come on, man, we can drive up there. And let's all go. And I finally relented, and I said, okay. We didn't rent a booth or anything. We just attended as sightseers, you know. And so, to me, I thought it was rather amazing because I'd heard of Ed Hardy in San Diego and so forth. And I thought, well, they, like the guy that made the heart sign
Cliff.
Yeah, all those guys. I said, well, I've seen all these guys. They just do big fat lines. And I said, a child can put tattoos on like that. I don't even understand the popularity of their tattoos because they're big fat lines. I said, you could take just a 9-liner or 7-liner or something. A third grader could do that. And I said, so I just didn't understand the popularity of their tattoos. And then when Ed comes over to me and says, well, this is just blowing my mind. And I said, what? And he said, the work on that big fat guy. And I said, well, we crank that stuff out every day in East LA. And he said, would it be cool to come and hang out? And I said, well, why not? And so he brought, Malone and guys from Hawaii and guys from San Francisco and they all tripped out on the whole activity, and we tattooed a bunch of them, and they all went back and did what they learned with the single needle, and all of them became quite proficient at it, but they backslid immediately. They reverted to thicker lines, and they went right back to the old tattoo style.
But you know what's funny about that story? All the pushback that you got when you were trying to get in, right?
Yeah.
And then these guys come in, see what you're doing, mind blown. Holy shit, we want to do that too. And you are like, sure, come on up, check it out. So like you basically could have said, hey, you know what? And you didn't, because you obviously were like, hey man, this is what we do.
Yeah.
I know there's going to probably be people that are going to be pissed off because I didn't get into tattoo lands and all of the jack. Because you've done that probably 100 times. I wanted to get into some of the stuff that, maybe I haven't heard or maybe other people haven't heard. But one of the big parts that I do want to talk about today is the Tattoo Heritage Project. And you getting that going. And I know it's a uphill battle. But
it is.
Is it coming along? Where are we at?
Well, as we speak, it's still in progress. And I do believe that I still think we need the corporate sponsors to some degree. I mean, let's face it, that's where they're getting fat off of it. I don't see why they don't want to share, because that's what it's all about. And to me, the reason I even got interested in it at all was when we had the 8 or 10 years ago, whenever it was, at the Historical Museum in LA.
Yeah.
Natural History Museum, and we had that tattoo exhibit going on. 3 of the staff members approached me and said, Charlie, we all had tattoos, and when they said we're going to do a tattoo exhibit here, we thought that's cool. And so they said, but our eyes were really open when we saw you and your whole family. We thought, wow, we need to get tattooed by this guy. So they came up to Modesto, and I tattooed all of them. We went out to dinner afterwards with Kimiko, and it was just me and her and the 3 staff members there. And so I said, so let me ask you guys something. You guys are museum people. Why in the world don't we have a tattoo museum in Los Angeles? And they said, we don't know, Charlie, but if you start one, we'll work for you.
Okay.
And I said, well, I'm not saying it should be in downtown LA. If I had my way about it, it would be in Long Beach, because that's the mecca of West Coast tattooing.
Right.
And I said, so I would think Long Beach would be the place, maybe not the Pike, but if so, that would be the perfect place. Or the Queen Mary would even be a good move.
Right.
And so we got interested in talking to them, and we have talked to them. And they showed us buildings and stuff, or, places we could be. But we didn't like what they wanted to offer us. And so that kind of went by the wayside, momentarily at least. I still think it would be a good idea, even if the museum was located elsewhere. I think it would be great to have at least a tattoo shop on the Queen Mary that foreign tattooers could come, and we could send them over there as part of our operation. They would be thrilled to be able to tattoo on the Queen Mary.
Right.
It would be quite a feather in their cap, I think. And so that's why I thought the Queen Mary would be great, because I went to the first one there in '82.
Yeah.
And I just thought it would be really the hot stuff. But as it turns out, we haven't had any luck yet. But here's the main thing I want to emphasize to anybody that ever sees this. Everybody that's interested in this project, I can't accept anything you want to give me to put in the museum. We need a depository before we ever think about a stone and mortar museum. We need a depository to put all these things that are gifted to the museum to be stored, protected environmentally, with the temperature and all that, and theft-wise. And we need to have a protected place to just deposit everything, and then let it be grouped together, for exhibit someday by region or subject or theme or whatever it is that they want to present. But first of all, we just have to have a place, because people just want to give me a lot of stuff. I have very few items that I started doing it, but then I said I can't be a storehouse for this stuff. So I do have a few things that I will put in there if it ever happens. Well, I don't want to say if. When it happened.
There you go.
Because little Shuey Keaton Hart told me, don't ever say if. It has to happen. It has to happen. It's going to happen.
So if there was somebody out there right now, so we get lucky enough that there's some millionaire watching this, what would you need from them?
Well,
besides the building, obviously.
Well, that's the thing. We would need a storehouse for all this stuff, and I don't want to think of it as a tomb or a crypt. I want to think of it as tattoo heaven, where all this stuff goes.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I would love to see that come to fruition. That would be amazing.
Because just imagine signs and furniture and machines and flash and everything that's related to the industry.
Right.
And everybody just thinks it's all about just flash and machine. But man, just think about all the signs and the furniture and different articles and stuff, that personal articles that they had. Right. Just like this guy's got some amazing flash himself.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to have a place, a depository to put all this stuff to begin with. So a millionaire can make that happen, I'm sure.
There you go. What if somebody wanted to help you out, maybe even financially? We know no more sending stuff to you, not yet. But if they wanted to help you financially or whatever, what's the best way to get in touch with the Tattoo Heritage Project to help out?
Well, I guess you'd have to. I got a card at tattooheritage.org, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I'll put it up on the screen. I'll look it up.
But yeah, and Kimiko, she's the one that's she's my right hand. She's my right hand, literally.
Right.
And bless her heart, she's an angel from heaven. I declare. But she told me the first time her mom brought her to the tattoo shop in East LA, because she couldn't find a babysitter.
Yeah, say who her mom is.
Huh? Lady Blue?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when they opened the door, I was tattooing, and she said, I looked over and said, Carol, get that kid out of here. This is no place for kids.
Nice.
Because we had hardcore gangsters in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I could take you to a guy that would give you the last ride to the desert, you know, and think nothing of it. It was like shooting a dog, you know.
So I know you got a bunch of tattoos lined up today, and I don't want to eat up too much of your time, but I do have one more good question for you.
Okay.
Who's your favorite tattoo artist of all time?
Gee, I'd say Lou Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that guy because you have to appreciate a man. He told me that he paid his way through dental school. And that day, you had to be a dentist to make teeth. There was no denturist allowed. And he says, I wanted to make my own teeth and my wife's teeth. So I went all the way through dental school.
Wow.
To be able to do that.
Nice.
And I, besides that, I love the brown eagles that he had right here on his front of his muscle. And to this day, I hate that I had Los Angeles that he put on there, and I ended up covering it up, and I hate that. But, you know, it's like layers and layers of stuff.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question.
Okay.
So obviously you've been tattooed by a lot of legendary people.
Yeah.
Dead or alive, if you could get a tattoo, one more tattoo, who would it be?
Well, I was never tattooed by Zeke. I'd like to have gotten something from him because I really admired the guy as loose a cannon as he was.
Yeah.
You know, I really respected the guy. I heard he was one of the fastest tattooers out there, and I believe that. But I also know his his reputation of here today, gone tomorrow.
He was definitely very flighty.
But yeah, I respected his abilities, and I would like to have been tattooed by him.
Right on.
Can I ask a question from here?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you just had Goodtime Charlie's. Tattoo Land came after you left, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that.
Well, a lot of people really don't get that because my shop is called Goodtime Charlie's Tattoo Parlor.
Yeah.
After I sold it to Ed, and they moved it across the street, they ended up calling it Tattoo Land because I get Ed says that he named it after Tomorrowland and all that out at Disneyland.
I heard Freddie came up with it.
Well, see, that's a different thing too.
At Disneyland, they came up with it when they were on mushrooms.
Yeah, well, there you go. I don't know what the truth really is, but one of them, I guess, from that worked in that, because Ed stayed there 8 years after he bought it.
Right.
And when he called me up in Kansas and asked me, he said, Charlie, I've been here 8 years now, and I still come down from Frisco once a month and spend a few days with these guys. But he says, I want to simplify my life and move to Hawaii. And he said, so I'm trying to sell the place to a tattooer, but they all want me to carry it, and I'm not going to do that. So I guess I'm just going to sell it to a doctor for a write-off, tax write-off. And he said, so what do you think about me working something out with Jack and letting him keep the name? And I said, I think that'd be a good idea because I said, he made me proud for sure.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that'd be okay with me. He made me proud, so that'd be good.
Yeah, I love that they carried your name through the history of that shop.
And Jack even told me, he said, I'm the only guy I know in the tattoo world that's only worked under one name. And it's not my name, it's your name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And one little other quick question. Did you only apprentice your son Nick and Dalton, or did you apprentice anybody else besides Jack?
Jack and Creeper.
Okay.
Both of those guys were the only two in L.A. Lady Blue, I had worked with her at the Pike. And so I didn't teach her anything. So those were the only two in L.A. And my son-in-law, Dalton, years and years and years later, who I ran off for 4 years, because I just I didn't want to teach anybody else.
Yeah.
I taught all three of my kids
Yeah.
because what are you gonna? You got to teach them what you know. But those were the only two in Southern California, and then Dalton. I finally relented because I thought, am I just like a crazy old prospector? Another big yellow rock, you know, and just threw it away, you know. But I really, I saw, and to my, or to his credit, I'll say that he's probably one of the most artistic individuals
Cleanest.
I've ever met.
Cleanest, amazing tattoos. But Nick made a name for himself down here.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, Nick, Joker's Wild.
oh yeah. Well, Nick, he tattooed 40 years.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. When I closed my shop, he lived off his comics for 2 years, selling them, you know, through the internet and stuff. And I watched the last $35,000 van load go out of his garage of comics. And so he said, well, I guess I'll go to work for Todd in Redondo Beach, who he had taught years ago when he had Joker's Wild. So he goes down there and they tell him, you're up. This chick lays her phone down and says, how much and when? And he said, where's it going? And she said, right there, lower forearm. And he said, black or color? She said, black. He said, that'd be 4 bills and we can do it right now. And so she said, okay. So she sits down. He shaved her. He looked at it and he picked up a pen and he just drew it on her, tattooed her. And she leaves, and later she puts on Yelp, well, yes, it did turn out to be a fine tattoo, but I don't know if I'd go back to that shop because they don't use software. This guy drew it directly on me. And I said, oh my God, that's a good reason to just quit the business right there.
Right.
They want to eliminate the human eye and hand element from a
body perfectly, muscles drawn.
handcrafted book art. That don't even make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he got very turned off. He thought, well, they're all thinking backwards now, you know.
I think that you and I can probably sit here for another 8 hours talking about all the stuff that is jacked up and not correct, but that's a story for another day, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to get you on a tangent, but I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it too, and there's a million stories out there and more to be told, I'm sure.
Right on. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, Buck,
Appreciate it, man.
for this nice interview, and hope somebody learned something out of this
Hopefully.
that they didn't know.